Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and if you're new here, I have watched every single playoff game for the summer of 2022. Yes, including that one, all 383 games, and we're reviewing every day of Worlds 2022, and we're on day 5. Day 5, the first best of 5s of the tournament itself. We hit the first round of the qualifiers for groups, and some expectations were hit, others less hit. I was right on one account and wrong on another account. These things happen. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we know what you're saying. We say goodbye to Loud and to the Saigon Buffaloes. You will be missed. It is what it is. But we'll take a look at the games over here. A lot of these I'll be posting also on TikTok, so you can just look at that in the comments down below. And without further ado, let's just take a review of these best of 5s. Our first series of the day is Mad Lions, the LEC's 4th seed, versus Saigon Buffaloes, the VCS's 2nd seed. Goes 3-1, as stated in the beginning of the video. There is something to appreciate on the large improvements that came from the Buffaloes, a team that had so many hot-headed approaches to the game, and quite honestly here, it's unexpected, really, in terms of who was supposed to go and qualify here. And instead, with all of these improvements, came out with a solid understanding of their win conditions, especially those of their opponents, and arguably one of the best team fighters of play-ins. Mad, for their part, created solid plans of attack, incredible early game plays around vision and tempo, and overall, incredibly solid. Way more than they had been, at least within their playoffs. Now, there is something to be said that this particular best of 5 played out how it really would have rebuked some of the criticism that Mad Lions had as to how they qualified into Worlds. And by all means, some of them are there. The majority of them, however, should be laid to rest. They deserve to be at Worlds at this point. Now, whether they can keep this up against Evil Geniuses is up in the air, but based on their tempo, it looks like it will largely be on who controls the early game first, and whether either team keeps up their momentum and doesn't throw it away in their late game. My MVP for the series is Elyoya, whose early game impact left Saigon Buffaloes really grasping for air. Our second series of the day is Detonation Focus Me versus Loud. Detonation, first seed of the LJL, Loud of the first seed of the CBLOL. Unfortunately, it goes 3-1. Or fortunately, depending on how you want to view it, I love both of these teams. It's great and saddening. Now, I can admit, when I'm wrong, I thought that Loud would win this series and would be based mostly off their consistency around neutrals, visions, and side lane pressure. And yet, that is what did them in. That and their reliance on very low damage composition while teamfighting late game with said composition types. It doesn't do enough that your team fighting is consistent, or that your neutral objectives are consistent. Without the gold generation and the damage, it just doesn't matter. And that's just it, right? Loud wouldn't be able to generate the gold to match their solid early game tempo. And as such, Detonation Focus Me could get away with a low proactive approach to these games. As such, Detonation only have to match the team fighting late game and avoid their usual macro mistakes. And with it, ta-da! An easy template for victory. Or relatively. It's an easier template. Because I find myself concerned about this kind of approach, especially as they move towards the Royals, who Draft higher damage compositions on the regular, play an incredibly aggressive early game, and will match team fighting. They're about to face off a scarier version of Loud. Like, you can't just... Granted, it'll be interesting. But with Loud's approach to the game allowing you to generate the gold you did, you're not going to get that kind of play against the Royals. Now, my MVP for this game, for this series, goes to Yaharong, who controlled 10 elms in lane and then all of Loud during these team fights. Now, from this particular series, a lot of it was on paper expectations being fulfilled, right? But let's not get this wrong. Despite the scoreboards and looking as if there's only just one game that was dropped and it was just not a fluke, but it was just more like a misplay, the Buffaloes clearly understood what Mad Lion's weaknesses were, which was a lack of understanding of how to apply some of their strengths to the late game and coordinate during team fights. And while the Buffaloes could not translate that into an early game pressure or even collect gold regularly enough or consistently enough, or even sometimes that their own aggression backfired on them, doesn't mean that their recognition shouldn't be there. The mistakes that they had on paper here are no less in terms of like many of the other lower seeded teams that come into the tournament. And the same goes towards those series with Loud and Detonation Focus Me. Loud themselves as players individually kept up in a way that was very surprising. Robo may have been the star of the show at that particular point, but it wasn't as if it was done in isolation. The particular playstyle really made Detonation Focus Me have to consider a different approach to their game than just we are stronger by default, teams capitulate, and we play standard all the way till the end. Because they couldn't. And honestly, I commend them. This is the funnest I've seen the Brazilian League be in a long time. And it's awesome. I had a concern before Worlds was coming in my last World Watch video, that as it looked like so many of these regions were close in competition, that we would get to Worlds and it would be one-sided affairs. And while it seems like that because they're best-of-1 formats, and best-of-1 formats have sometimes the ideation of skewing things, these best-of-5s alone tell me that we aren't in for purely a one-sided affair, except for Gen G. We aren't in for a purely one-sided affair. We are in for a series of bangers. And honestly, I can't wait for tomorrow's series. They sound like they're going to be phenomenal. Now, there's a situation where if things go as is, if things go as expected, then teams are slotted automatically. Their groups are already determined. Boring. There is a world in which it doesn't matter if our evil genius is mad. I think that's a coin flip. You could coin flip. I am personally, banking on evil geniuses who have been a tad bit more consistent through all stages of the game. But the early game from Mad Lions, I will return to that. But there's a part of me that thinks that Detonation Focus Me can find angles to win against the Royals. Do I think it's going to happen? No. Mostly because of the lack of early game aggression from Detonation Focus Me, or the lack of proactivity in general until we get to the very late game. And usually Royals will never let that happen if an enemy team doesn't usually do anything to contest that. That's what they are. The Royals are an early game aggressive team, while Detonation Focus Me is a team that defaults to the late game, hoping they've gotten their win conditions automatically. And I don't think they're going to get the chance for it. But there's an angle in which they can. So I'm putting my thoughts that the Royals are going to win, but they're going to win. I'm going to say 3-1. That's a safe bet. It's 3-1. Well, as for Evil Geniuses versus Mad Lions, I think that's going 5 games. 5 games. Now, I'm going to bet on Mad Lions. I'm putting my foot down. They have looked scarier and more consistent throughout the parts of the early game, and while their late game has been a hot mess on occasions, Evil Geniuses have yet to show the same kind of highs that Mad Lions show. So it pains me. I really like Evil Geniuses, but I think I'm going to side with Mad Lions. So it looks like my expectations that we're going to get our automatic slotted situations where Fnatic goes into Group A, Mad Lions goes into Group B, DRX is already in Group C, and Royal Never Give Up goes into Group D. Womp womp. Boring. But the fun one is if Evil Geniuses wins and Detonation Focus Me wins. That'll be super fun. Those are my thoughts, though. I want to hear what you guys think. Who do you think is going to win? All of that good jazz. How do you think the games have been? Do you think so far from the plans we should be expecting fantastic group stages? Or are you still on the fence because plans is kind of wild and chaotic at this given point? I would love to hear any and all of your thoughts in the comments down below. Super appreciate it. And again, if you like these kinds of videos, leave a like and subscribe. You'll have a different couple of videos with all of the other ones I've done for Worlds and Meet the Teams. It's the other way around. Editing me will have a nightmare. You'll have besides other videos that I've done regarding Worlds as well as the other Meet the Teams videos. And I appreciate everybody who watches. Been fantastic. I hope you have a great one. I'll see you next time.